matter of feeling guilty. I don't think that's very helpful, right, feeling guilty about things. I think we need to look at our consumption patterns critically and realise what the impacts are, and then make realistic and wise and possible decisions based upon that careful consideration. Well, I suppose the short answer is yes. I think that our consumption of dairy has a high environmental, ecological impact, and it's one of we need to wean ourselves on it.
There was you had a question as well.
Please, what's an eco-brick?
Yeah.
Oh, I do apologise. Eco-brick, they can be any plastic container, but the form that seems to be accepted around the country are those 2-litre bottles, plastic milk bottles. When they're empty, you simply stuff any non-recyclable plastics into the bottle. But you've got to make sure it's tightly packed, and it takes an immense amount of. I've been filling one for weeks, and it still keeps coming in. But yes, and then with the top on it, that becomes an eco-brick, and it's used to build gardens, even small buildings like school classrooms.
On that use of single-use plastics, obviously I work in the university and students do undergraduate and postgraduate research.
I don't think I was just shouting.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. And the single-use plastic issue, I remember some years ago, when the plastic bag tax came on, and before that, I'm having students researching this, and there were a lot of opposition to those things that introducing other parts of the world and different parts of our country area, and people say it's not possible, we won't be able to change our practices. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a really plastic bag now, at least one that's not going to be reused or life. We do need to think about the. You see now it's also now in the popular press. It's in vogue to try and reduce single-use plastics. I work in the coastal environment, and certainly plastics in the marine environment are a huge issue. But it's also the things that we can't see with the plastics. Over the last few years, we've been doing some research along with other universities on these things, which are now again popular, the plastic nurdles. These are the little small beads that they use in plastic manufacture, which get spilt and go onto beaches. You can be with people who manage beaches and say there's no plastic on this beach. They take it off like Southport, Ainsdale even. And you stand there with them. I've done it multiple times here and abroad, and stood there with the managers and said, look at the sand. And when you actually analyse the sand, there's loads and loads of plastic in it. And yesterday I spent the afternoon with one of my colleagues and a postgraduate student in a laboratory, and we're doing research looking at the impact of 4G sport pictures, where they use shredded tyres as the playing surface, and these things get washed out into the watercourses, and we're looking at this in the soils and looking at environmental gradients. So we have to think about the stuff. It's not just the stuff that we can see, but the stuff that we can't see, because the things in the environment, those things in the environment can be just as pernicious.
Tony Walsh, one from Oxford. There was an article in the Times some years ago by Catholics fly.
For those who might not have heard the question, it was an article that Tony had read entitled Can Catholics Fly? Sorry, so any comments?
Well, yes, I think we can. I fly for work. I can't change that. If I'm going to do a CAFOD visit, it's the distances I'm going. At the moment, there's no alternative. I decided, as far as possible, I'm not going to fly recreationally. There is a way in which you can compensate for flying. Paul, you probably understand that you can pay so you can pay a compensation for flying which offsets the carbon that you're. But I don't think anything, whether it's eating dairy or flying or buying clothes, it's all going to change instantly. But that we have a direction in which we go. And that says that maybe those people who are thinking of 2 trips to Thailand this year might just do it once. It's a good start.
I think that the issue of that particular issue of air travel is particularly problematic. Again, I know people who are looking at the carbon offsetting, and carbon offsetting, not just for air travel, is highly complex. And I would say to you, you need to read into it because that, when you book your EasyJet flight, and there's a little box at the bottom that says, do you want to take this to carbon offset and to do some things? Well, okay, that's a good first step. But the calculations that are involved in that, and the consumer economic things behind that are complex and contested in environmental terms. I go back to saying that underneath, Mr. Jones, you touched upon this, it comes back to changing our attitudes and values, because that the trip to Thailand or the EasyJet flight down to the Costa del Sol or off to European cities, that ease of travel both promotes international understanding, but it raises questions about the way that there's patterns and shape of our lives. And I think that underneath that we have to change our values, where we reshape our lives. And don't forget, in 100 years' time, we'll have the climate of Bordeaux, so why would we want to go anywhere else?
Jan.
I just wanted to ask them, does the diocese have an ethical investment policy or guidelines, and is it accessible?
I can't speak for Liverpool. I think that there is now an ethical investment committee for the Bishops' Conference, which is influencing all dioceses. As far as I know, that is generally applied. There is ethical investment with fairly stringent principles underlying it.
Sorry, I think this gentleman here had a question. The middle table, yeah? Yeah. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah, you, yeah.
Some years ago I was studying I was at the Princess Gardener, and we had to do soil science and motion and things like that, technology. And we were given these leaflets, so they finished about 1943. So we're getting towards the end of the Second World War. And what the information was about the use of DDT, which was just coming out at that time, and how wonderful DDT was. And the thing that came out about this was that they were spreading DDT all over the countryside that had been devastated by the war. And anyway, they continued using DDT for years afterwards. People coming out of prisoner of war camps into all these devastated areas. And they basically shoved this all over the place, Now this is perfectly alright, this DDT. Always. Our answers for all our problems. And then we learned after that, that famous book, Silent Spring. I don't know if you remember it. All the devastation DDT was causing to our planet. Now, I don't know why it seems to me that the media seems to accept the experts' opinions all the time without questioning them, And what our tutors trying to say, you're going to have to question a lot of these chemicals you're using, because they're going to kick us back years later. And I found that a lot of things we were using, like mercurized mold sand, we used to use it with mercurized mold sand on cricket pitches. We used to use it on bowling greens, And the idea was to kill moths. And it's also, if you put seeds down on these areas, the birds were missing because the seeds were bitter. But people in the landscaping business, gardener, handling all this stuff, which was perfectly all right, you know. He said, actually, today, handling make it as lonesome as being the norm, you know. And these are the experts who try to say, oh, it's all right, chap, I use it.
Okay, so I'll ask you. Yeah, thank
We
you
have
for
to
that.
be aware, say, you know.
Yeah, okay. Paul, you have a comment on that?
Thank you. I mean, it's a very, very good observations. And indeed, Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, published in 1962, just pre-Vatican II, was a milestone and a turning point in the popularisation of environmental thinking. Those of you who don't know, it tells the story of this nasty chemical DDT, which gets into the environment, goes through the food chain. One of the results of that is that it thins bird egg shells, which means that birds can't breed, and therefore the spring is silent because there are no birds. And that was one of the things that prompted the popularisation of the environmental movement, where we then challenge decision makers and promoted the science of the environment, so that between the critical stance of the public and the critical stance of scientists come together, and we try and then move things forward. And then, if we I'll wander into the perhaps theological church ecclesiastical issues, but then we look at Vatican II. At Vatican II, one of the things in Vatican II is to encourage us to be critical Catholics, right? To engage actively with our faith. And so it seems to me that to engage with environmental issues simply is the same thing as engaging with our faith, because it's God's creation.
Which brings me on nicely on to Bishop John. Have you got any comments there?
Certainly, I think we have to recognise that ethically we've got something to say on every subject, because every subject is interconnected, is part of God's plan, and we don't need to become political in the sense of telling people how to vote, but that we should be educating ourselves and being prepared to speak out. One of the great sadnesses to me at the moment is, on the one hand, there's a much louder voice about the environment, what we're doing with it, and then you break for the adverts, and we've got these ridiculous adverts about, well, dare I say it, McDonald's, Burger King, and that sort of consumption, or these stupid adverts about go and buy as many clothes as you possibly can because they'll all be changing fashion next week, we've got to get them in quick. It's ridiculous. We're not speaking with one voice, and so we've got to, I think, as Christians, we've got to be critical and be prepared to speak out about the standards we're expecting, and say, if something is wrong, that we point it out. But science, I think, is taking us much more quickly into the zone of knowing if something that we're beginning to use is actually harmful. We tend to know about that fairly quickly now.
Thank you. I know there's a lot of people waiting to ask questions. I think I'm going to give you a little order, because this gentleman here, whose name I don't know, then I will ask Susan, then I will ask Jed, and then I think I'll ask, is it Tim? Okay? So you first, and then Steve.
It's a question, more of a clarification, right, to Paul. Your figure of 408 milligrams per litre of ppm CO2 in the atmosphere as measured at Marlow Observatory
Last November.
So that's right at the top of the volcano. So is not that figure there, is that an average, or is it going to be far higher over India or China and so on? That's really, what is that figure actually telling us?
Sure. Of course, where you measure it will vary around the world, and we go to areas where pollution levels are much higher and a little bit lower. And so what I suggest taking a general trend, and the reason why it's so high up is so that it samples in as close as we can into the upper atmosphere. That's the reason. I think that the headline point is we're producing more carbon dioxide, and it's one measure of it. The direction of change is
That's a
unfavourable.
standard, and you always go back to that point.
Yes.
You compare and contrast.
It's the globally accepted sampling point, as best as we can to give us a picture of generally which direction we're going in.
Okay, Susan?
Yes, Parliament's declared a climate emergency. Do you think that's anything other than a form of words to make politicians look good? Has it got any teeth? And if it has, should our churches, our archdioceses also be declaring a climate emergency?
Bishop John, do you want to take that?
I think the statement from Theresa May was really quite clear. One is, I mean, the Civics was saying she's just trying to get some good policies in for her own legacy later on. What we need to do is to make sure that, having stated zero emissions by 2050, that's what we've got to be aiming for. And if the policies aren't coming out, then we've got to be asking, where are they? Certainly, at the moment, I'm pushing for, that's a bit, I wouldn't say that, I'm helping in the process of producing policy for the Catholic bishops of the Conference of England and Wales, clear policy for all dioceses. And I think we've got to make sure that what we're saying in principle is what we're beginning to produce in practice.
Do you want to comment, Paul?
Just to complement that, to say that whichever politician comes out with these lines, it's nothing new. You can go back, I mean, the first serious zero carbon Britain project and proposal with policies and actions that were required, excuse my memory, but at least 10 years ago, with the Centre for Alternative Technology in Machynlleth. And I've, for year on year on year, I've taken my students there. I went there 30 odd years ago when it was in a slate quarry, and some of these people are almost prophets. These are different, environment with the horizon scanning, and they've had a big project called Zero Carbon Britain. So what I'm saying is again, we need to listen to the peripheries here. We need to listen to some of the stuff that's coming out on the edge to move us forward.
Okay, I know I've got several people waiting. Jed, I think you were next.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you for both of you for wonderful talks. I really appreciate it. I'm sure we all did. My question is really about the church's response and what we can do. I remember going to, I was part of a group a few years ago that put a strategy together for Cheshire West and Chester Council, and it was greeted or welcomed into formal existence by an environmentalist. He was talking to a secular audience, and he said that people won't listen to scientists in the future, and they won't listen to politicians, but they will listen to faith communities. And that gives me hope for the future, that actually what we're about here today is people outside. There is a significance to what our contribution can be. In terms of what the Catholic Church's response is, as Bishop John has said, I think you can see some of the impacts of things like that from Catholics work overseas. You can see that. We're not there, but you can see pictures of it. I think the church locally can show examples of what that means in practice, both in the way that we live our lives and in the practices of our domestic agencies, and also in what we're encouraging our local politicians, because most of this agenda will be pushed down, of course, to local authorities, won't it? So it's what we can do, not just campaign for Catholic, but what we can do to campaign locally. And that's, so there's bits of action and there's bits of this. But my question is about this. How do we encourage, enable people to go on that road of conversion? And how do we equip our liturgists, our priests, to be able to encourage and point people in the direction that the media won't point them?
Thank you. Bishop John?
Yeah, I was, as I said,
And deacons.
and deacons, newly ordained or otherwise. I think I've got a particular hope here that because there's excitement in the schools, I think that generates out to families and can have a great effect. One thing, a little bit of a dream about this is that we've got so many young people who are not associated with their faith in any formal sense outside the school gates. But if we are seen as a church to be taking very seriously what climate change is all about, I think that could enthuse young people to engage in a sense of faith that otherwise they won't see. And I think local initiatives can be born from our schools in big quantity. As I say, I've got 208 schools in the Diocese of Salford, and I believe that they can generate a great deal of enthusiasm for local change.
I think at this moment, before I ask our deacon to comment, I think it's a good moment to bring in Cassia, perhaps, if you could say a bit about the involvement of young people.
Yes, well, just to say a little bit who I am. I am a chaplain in one of our Liverpool Archdiocese schools, work at Broughton Hall, and from the work that I do there, I'm part of the obviously Justice and Peace committee, looking at young people and education. And we have a Justice and Peace group at school. And for this year, our Justice and Peace group has focused on the environment. And as part of the environment, we've had a group of children who have wanted to get involved and build issues about school and seen where the school is now, how we can improve the environment of our school and take it into the wider community. Now, the pupils who are involved in that, as we've heard, aren't always the ones who are at church, but they are desperate to help the world and do something. And through Justice and Peace environment work we've done in school, they have seen that we can provide for others, that we can help others, and by directing that and guiding them through the faith that we have, we've been able to unleash a bit of that faith within them. We can see that the path that they want can be guided by their Christian values. So, for example, the initiatives that the pupils have come up with themselves. Again, we have our eco-bricks. They love making their eco-bricks. We've got a beautiful pile of them to make an ornament for our school garden. We have wanted to go back to metal cutlery. We believe at school we had to move to plastic because pupils were just happy to throw it in the bin when they finished. It's that consumerist society of we're finished, it goes. And they were throwing metal cutlery away. So we've had to do a big sort of a few assemblies and a few ways of thinking just to change the mindset that we don't need plastic because this is what plastic does to our world. We'll go back to the metal, just don't put them in the bin and make sure we put them somewhere to be washed. And simple things like that that you don't think about. We've had to do, but haven't a major change in school. We make sure that we recycle all plastic and paper in school because obviously you can think we go through so much. And again, people have a habit of just sticking it in the reuse bin. We've made sure we've got blue bins in each class, well, blue plastic bags in each classroom, which the environment group go around and empty every single week into our big blue bin, and then take those plastic bags back to the classrooms. We don't throw those out, they get reused. So there's just a few things we've done in these past few months, trying to take it off the ground. And I know it's not just in one school, it is all around, and it's from the primaries, it's into the secondaries, into the colleges. So there is a generation coming up that are doing what they can and trying their best. There are some people who want to buy clothes and just throw away things and don't want to get the renewable bottles, just buy what they can. But there is a really good core group of young people coming up who are doing what they can to try and get us on the right path moving forward.
Thank you, Cassia. Thank you. Paul, do you want to comment on this question about the...
Just sounds great to me, let's do it.
Thank you. I know there's a lot of people still waiting. I'm trying to keep the order in my mind. I know Steve had a... Pardon?
Tony from Ellesmere Port.
Oh, sorry, Tony. I got your name wrong before. Tony from
My
Ellesmere Port.
question is for Bishop John, and it's for the Bishop's Conference. What is being done about renewable energy and the use of for our individual parishes? Because we've got tremendous resources with all our church buildings to have the solar panels in, the photovoltaic panels on church roofs?
Certainly. Unfortunately, there's an awful lot of local authorities do not allow church buildings to be used as platforms for solar panels. I think that will have to change, and I think the local opinion will force it to change. But you're quite right, we've got so much possibility there, and we've got to pursue it. Listed buildings, can't have them, but certainly in the northwest, there has been a real reluctance on the part of local authorities to allow it, but we will work away at that.
Thank you. Steve?
I'd like a point of clarification, really, about eco-bricks. One of my daughters works with an organisation called Faiths for Change, who are based in Liverpool, and so we've been making eco-bricks, or trying to at home for quite a while. It's quite difficult, Peter. You need a 1.5 litre pop bottle, and you've got to put into it 500 grams of plastic. It's a lot. So there's a technique. I've been pushing it in with a poke, and I've yet to make one that actually weighs 500 grams. And so the question really is, how do we cope with disappointment? Well, we set off with great intentions of making these things, but we finally can't do it. So, and in churches, how do we get our churches to say, we're not only going to give it a go, we're going to persevere past the point of disappointment?
Okay.
I've spent several decades now in my working life as an environmentalist, and I can be the most depressing person to be with and raised at times, and it is hard, and there is disappointment with the environment, but I think perhaps as I've moved on, it's to set realistic expectations, small steps, small bits of progress. I remember, if I think back, as an undergraduate student in the mid-1980s, climate change wasn't really on the agenda. We were talking about acid rain. That was the issue. I went out. I wanted to go off and, dragged off to do a PhD. At that time I wanted to go manage nature reserves or land rover and change. So I went off doing that, but working practically in the environment. And then this great wave of enthusiasm and optimism which led up to the first Earth Summit in 1992. And I honestly thought, by the mid-90s, the world, all our problems would be solved. Right? And I think that and it hasn't. They're still there. So I think we have to temper our expectations, but remain absolutely hopeful and realise that be hungry for change, but not to let that, not to starve for the lack of change. That we need to be well fed and realise that maybe our consumption patterns for hope need to be moderated.
Can I just say that all that plastic you've been stuffing in there, all that has not gone to waste, all that is not in landfill, all that is not choking fish. You are doing something really important, and that brick will be completed eventually. But in the meantime, just imagine the amount of stuff, and it is a very large amount of stuff you're getting into that one space, which is not going to do damage elsewhere. Thank you.
I'm going to take one final question from Philip Lodge, who I know has been waiting for some time to ask a question, so that's why I'm asking Philip ahead of, I know lots of other people want to ask, but there will be opportunities over lunch for further conversations. Philip.
Thank you, Terry. Philip Lodge, I'm the chair of the Liverpool United Nations Association, so I'm glad to see the references to various organisations from the UN. I'm also a Methodist, and a long time ago we started working with an organisation called Eco Church, and I think the Liverpool Anglican Diocese has been taking that as a Lenten project this year, I'm not sure. But my main point is to say this is quite a good audience for a Saturday morning, but how pathetic for a regional thing. And I have to admit with shame that I came across this only 2 weeks ago. It is Liverpool City Region's Year of the Environment, 2019. Hands up if you knew that. You see, listen, thank you. Yeah. You saved your post for another year. I said this to Bishop John at the interval, that since Derek and David and the collapse of Marcia consequently after their great innovations, we stopped working together. Now, the city isn't even getting through to us. So what should we do that we can do better in making sure that we have contacts and that the contacts are actually contacting their contacts so that we get these messages? Because I think the point I took from here is that we really don't have the time to waste.
Would either of you want to comment, or both of you, I'm sure? Yeah.
I think the networking is vitally important. It goes in waves and troughs, doesn't it? And we mustn't give up on it. I see it gradually in Manchester making more of an impact. There are more organisations actually working together. We're not allowed enough voice yet, but we mustn't forget that. Ecumenically and interfaith, we're doing something, but it's not enough. So I agree. Yes, I agree with what you're saying, and we could work at it.
Paul? I take your point as a member of the Ecumenism Commission, newly appointed member of the Archdiocese. I take the point on that. In terms of the environmental joined upness, the Merseyside region was a real pioneer nationally for this. We look back because of the post-industrial degraded landscapes that we have, which run from here through to Manchester. So the early response we pioneered from the era. So Freeman of the City was Lord Heseltine, who came here and established the first groundwork trusts in St Helens to remediate landscapes, basically working with scientists who taught me at the University of Liverpool. We had things like the Mersey Basin campaign. The River Mersey was where most polluted rivers in Europe lost its fish life 50, 60 years ago. Now it's really clean. The Mersey Basin campaign, led by Keith and Professor Beatty, done that. So Merseyside and the region has a track record of delivery and joining things up. But then we hit austerity. And Liverpool, I'll say this publicly, Liverpool City, it's a bit of a black hole for the environment. It's really, really hard there, and it's hard in other areas. And this is where local authority leads. It just sits, and a lot of these are non-statutory actions now have been pared away. And it's hard. And that year of the environment that we put there, even within the environmental circles, it's not well promoted because of lack of resources. And that's just a fact.
And I think also it's worth remembering, of course, we do have people here from beyond Liverpool City region, and these are all things that we can talk about over lunch. I will